Very good afternoon, and it's been a pleasure to talk to you and the enlightened audience which I already see. And the topic which I've chosen today is coaching at C-suite levels. So, just a quick show of hands. When we talk about C-suite levels, we have different versions of C-suites. Sometimes it's reflective about title, sometimes it's about roles and responsibilities, and sometimes it's also about personalities. So I'll amplify when I talk about C-suite, what am I really talking about? But how many of us are C-suite leaders here? Can I just have a show of hands? Excellent. So I see some of us already being C-suite leaders. Very often I was asked this question, and all in good humor. I've been a C-suite leader myself. So one gentleman tells me that, see, I'm a C-suite leader in my organization, and this is what I do. So he had approached me for a coaching engagement. So when I asked him, how large is your enterprise? He said, 5 people. So I don't want to exactly relate C-suite roles by the size of the organization or the team size which you deal with. But yes, this person is a C-suite leader, irrespective of the size of the organization. So before I start with, let me give a quick introduction about myself. You need not read the slide. I'll obviously be telling you the key highlights and the points here. So my own background is on the education side. I'm a mechanical engineer. I've done my master's in business administration and my PhD in human resources and change management. Now, when we started coaching, our career in coaching, when I actually introduced this in coaching for the first time in my organization, which was almost about 30 years back, and at that point of time, we were not getting any coaches. So we had to look at psychologists and counselors who came with their own version of coaching, a little more inclined towards therapy than coaching per se. But we didn't know enough of coaching. We didn't have any formal education in coaching. We didn't have any formal awareness. But yes, you felt a need. And where I came from, the first time I introduced it in an organization I'd worked with, I was the CHRO of that organization, one of our senior leaders, very strong functionally, but had a lot of behavioral issues. Interpersonal skills, inability to handle conflict effectively, inability to drive collaboration, especially some of the common issues which do happen. Some of the common issues which are not uncommon. So we approached a psychologist there, and the psychologist actually started with therapy. And at the end, when our expectation was we want to see behavioral changes in the individual, we didn't see any behavioral changes. But when I asked the individual, the C-suite leader, he was raving after every session. He said, oh, great, I had a good time and I could vent off what I wanted to. So it was more therapy. But I said, fine, maybe you've benefited personally, but what's the return on investment to the organization? We still see you continuing doing the same things. So this also sparked a thought in my mind. Is there a structure to it? Is there a formal way to it? And do we need to do it differently? So that's where I enrolled in the ICF program, and probably I would have been, I may not get all facts right here, but I would have been the first 10 or 15 coaches in India who were PCC accredited at that time. So I went through this accreditation, and as a part of my accreditation journey, I found that it's a good insight. It helped me clarify a lot of my doubts. But one doubt which still stayed in my mind is, how can I not give answers, and how can I only ask questions all the time? And is the client paying me to ask questions? So that's a thought which reflected in my mind. Any which way, I managed to get my PCC qualification. And I continue to renew it for a variety of reasons, some of them being commercial in nature as well, I'll be very honest. So this is where my coaching journey started. My corporate journey, my corporate background is, like I mentioned, I've been a C-suite leader in 3 enterprises, various size and shapes and different businesses. I've been the CHRO of Vodafone's GCC. So during my time, we grew it from a 200 FTE enterprise to a close to a 15,000 enterprise when I left. And I was also elevated as an executive board director on the board of Vodafone's GCC. I've also been the CHRO of Prudential PLC during my time. And I've headed HR for Sterlite Technologies and Sterlite Power, which were public listed companies. And I was managing the merger of these two companies, as well as the compliances which are associated with the merger. Having spent 27 years in the corporate world, I decided to actively pursue and start my own enterprise, which is called as Metamorphosis Unlimited. We essentially do 4 things to help enterprises and people. One is on the advisory part. Advisory, I look at organization restructuring, change management, performance management, that is integrating goal setting to rewards. Because at the end of the day, if goals are not aligned or integrated, and you reward them for different things, and which does happen at times, this is where I help organizations who really want to integrate this, and integrate it not only to the rewards, but also to their strategy. So this is the other area which I work in. And I also work with organizations who are very serious about changing the culture. And not limited to 2 days vision, mission, and values workshops, but those who are really interested in making a cultural change. So I work with organizations. And a number of organizations I work with are family-run businesses who are now looking at professionalizing their offerings, either inducting professionals and focusing on processes and people, which they have long neglected in the past. They've done very well, no doubt about it. Great strategic thinking, great financial acumen, but processes and people were missing, so I help them bridge those gaps. Another area which takes a lot of my time today is on executive coaching, and 60% of my time today is spent on executive coaching, where I work with senior leaders. C-suite, predominantly C-suite leaders, which includes CEOs and CXOs. And here, coming back to the definition of CXOs here, are those who are either holding board responsibilities or who are holding functional responsibilities or P&L responsibilities. So these are some of the leaders I work with. And all of them are direct reports to the CEO. And I also work with CEOs. Increasingly, a lot of my time today is being spent on CEOs, which is also a positive sign. Because initially when I started coaching and you went to a CEO, are there any CEOs in the room here? Can I just have a quick show of hands? Good. But anyway, no offenses meant. No offenses meant here. When I initially used to approach a CEO or CEOs used to talk to me about coaching, they used to say, my team needs coaching. So here are the guys in the room who really could benefit from your coaching. But never, in a very rare case, did a CEO said that I would also appreciate if I could get some help. So the problem was with everybody in the room other than me. But increasingly, that awareness is now increasing, and a lot of CEOs are opting for coaching themselves. Of course, some of them are opting more on the strategic areas. Some of them are opting more for very specific themes, like we want we are coming up with an IPO, and can you help me get me and my team ready to handle the IPO? So a lot of them are focused on specific thematic issues, but there is clarity in why they are engaging with you. So what I'm about to share in my presentations here, it's a quick short presentation. I'll take about 15-20 minutes, and hopefully if there's some time, I'll leave it open for Q&A. I'm just sharing my own experiences of working with C-suite leaders across public sectors. I've just finished an assignment with a large public sector with 2 executive directors who are each handling about $8 to $10 billion P&Ls, each of them. Some very interesting experiences. By interesting, I'm being positive. And a few surprises there, which also helped me understand how different public sectors work. And what are some of the strengths and, importantly, the constraints in which they work with, which is not easy. And coming back to that, I'll also focus on a few other areas. Apart from public sectors, I do a lot of work for global C-suite leaders, including CEOs and CXOs of multinational corporations across BFSI, across pharma, across FMCG, across consumer durables, and IT and ITES. So what makes some of these changes very sectorial specific, and what are some of the behaviors which you see a little different? So I'll just try to highlight and capture some of them from my experience. Now, your experience could be different, and that's absolutely fine, because each of us would have different experiences. But I thought I'll highlight some of my personal experience in this. And also, when I talk about sizes, most of the CEOs or the C-suite leaders I'm coaching with are at least $500 million annual revenue enterprise. I haven't invested too much of my time in coaching startup CEOs, but maybe I will one of these days. So what differentiates C-suite coaching from conventional coaching? The approach methodology may not be as different, but what I've seen is the kind of coachee or the client you're dealing with. What makes them a little different as compared to, let's say, mid-level executives. So in this case, one I've seen, my own experience says that there is a higher level of self-awareness in C-suite leaders. When they decide to engage you on coaching, they are very clear why they're engaging you, and they know what their strengths are and what some of their possible development areas are. So I've seen that. Strong functional capabilities. They clearly come with very strong functional backgrounds, and that's what's got them there. Some of the insights which I have seen is, while they are strong, they don't need coaching at a functional level. Probably a little more awareness in terms of the external environment and external best practices. But it's probably some of the softer skills, which is an area which they need to work on. They are very strong tactically and operationally. So clearly one doesn't have to coach them in this area. They come with a very, but strategic thinking is where I've seen a lot of C-suite leaders who, especially those who are transitioning either to a CXO role or a CXO transitioning to a CEO role, they could benefit with a certain amount of coaching at a strategic level. I've also seen this, a higher level of openness to feedback. Once they get comfortable with a coach, it takes time. My own experience is it can take anywhere between 2 to 3 sessions for them to be authentic, for them to feel vulnerable, and to express themselves openly. It takes anywhere between 2 to 3 sessions. In a few exceptional cases, I have seen them being absolutely upfront. But this is also dependent on the personality of the coachee you're dealing with, and how quickly they get comfortable. Another important aspect I have seen is the way coaching has been positioned to them. If coaching has been positioned as a corrective therapy, then obviously, they tend to be far more guarded. So it's about getting that positioning right in the first instance. But the moment it is seen as developmental and being non-judgmental, that is what breaks the ice, and they start becoming more open, more vulnerable. And the more open and the more vulnerable and the more authentic they are, that's where they get the best value. Of course, one also gives them the assurance in the first session. You're not here to be judged, nor is anything going to be reported back. The other thing which I have seen is once they are aligned, and once they are aligned with the actions, being key decision makers and leading and navigate change, you see quicker response times. The execution happens at a far quicker speed and with far higher levels of efficacy. One challenge which I've seen is the cultural nuances and different leadership styles and approaches. Because a lot of leaders have not gone through any formal coaching in the early stages of their career. And especially about people management, everybody has their own versions of the truth. They've worked with some good managers, they've had their own experiences, they've seen a few goods, they've seen a few not so goods, and they've formed their own impression about leadership. Now, if you were to ask people in the room, I'm probably not doing this as an exercise because of the limited time I have, but if we were to ask everybody in terms of leadership, what is your understanding of leadership? Believe me, you will get at least about 10 different answers here in the room. So that also translates into different leadership styles and approaches and different leadership personalities. So every different leadership style and personality requires a highly customized approach, or a bespoke approach, or a tailor-made approach. So 2 to 3 sessions I have seen goes purely in terms of understanding them, getting them to feel comfortable, understanding their own learning styles and preferences, and setting their goals with clear actions before we move down to the hardcore dimensions of coaching. So some of the people I've mentioned are executive leaders whom I've coached, public sector undertakings, CEOs of multinational corporations, CEOs of family-run businesses, and CEOs across industry segments like BFSI, IT, ITES, media, automotive, manufacturing, FMCG, and pharma. Now, interestingly, out of all of these, uh, two profiles I've seen are far more, you can say, they're more open to coaching and more open to actioning what has been mutually agreed on. Any guesses here? Which of these four profiles? From your experience, I'll share mine, of course. Out of these four profiles, who do you think are more open to coaching and more open to implementing specific actions? Absolutely, very, very surprisingly, I have seen, and this came to me as a surprise also, because initially when I started coaching, I was a little skeptical, but I had to get rid of my own unconscious biases before I started coaching public sector leaders. The receptivity, the kind of awareness about coaching is very, very high in public sectors. The kind of processes which they have are amazing. But I think the issue lies is the execution, and the fact is the hierarchy of decision making, which takes a very long time. And of course, they have another challenge, which is political interference. So, but the receptiveness of them as individual leaders very high. After that, I have seen as CEOs of multinational corporations coming second, and the third is family-run businesses, in that order. So this is where I have seen receptivity. Family-run businesses, I think one of the biggest challenges I have seen is they've built businesses from scratch. Having built businesses from scratch, they're used to doing things in a particular way, and they say that my way is the right way. So for them to adopt newer ways of working becomes a little more difficult. And the more one confronts them directly and you confront them straight on the face, the more is the resistance. So one has to ease them into it, into looking at newer ways of doing things. So some of the changes or rather challenges I've encountered as a coach are cultural diversity, high reliance on data and logic, and lesser on intuition and gut feel. Because typically in C-suite leaders, one is used to so many reviews. One gets so tuned to spreadsheets, PowerPoint presentations, where one doesn't leverage intuition. Intuition I have seen is much higher in family-run businesses, CEOs of family-run businesses, who take decisions even on their gut feel. At times, a conventional mindset to problem solving and decision making, sometimes for them to think blue ocean, think out of the box. This is a challenge because the mindset has got hardwired from experience. Some unconscious and conscious biases gathered from past experience, and diverse leadership and occasionally polarized leadership styles. So there are times where one has also experienced very polarized leadership styles, that this is my way of doing things. And my way of doing things works in all situations. This is an area where I've been working with a number of senior leaders to help them move away from that. And changing this mindset takes anywhere between 6 to 8 to 9 sessions, is only getting them to move into that mind shift change. Once you get them there, then the actions follow much more quicker and more easily. The approaches I follow to coach senior leaders, I leverage diagnostic tools like personality tests, career trajectory analysis, 360-degree feedback, and behavioral event interviews. A lot of these tools, some of you would be familiar with. But it's all about diagnosing those tools and leveraging these tools to see patterns of behaviors in individuals. And when one sees the impact of coaching, when I'm asked this question, what is the ROI or the impact on coaching? So I tell them it happens in various stages. The first stage will happen is through changes in behavior or behavioral changes. This is the first thing which you will see. When behavioral changes happen and you are able to link it and you see changes in skills, that's a stage 2, changes in skills. And then when you are able to relate it to their KPIs or their key result areas or their goals, then you will see a change in performance. So it's first behaviors, then skills, then performance. So I work very closely in terms of defining goals and measures of success, limiting it to a maximum of 3 goals, because more than that, nobody has the time in today's world, to be honest, whether you're a C-suite leader or not. Taking up more than 3 goals, incorporating it in our day-to-day lives when we have multiple job priorities to handle is not that easy. Understanding current reality, because everybody's current reality could be different. Like I said, a public sector reality is very different from a multinational CEO's grappling. Not 2 minutes. Who's grappling to handle different complex challenges of dealing with teams across different nationalities and also managing cultural diversity. It takes usually a minimum of 9 to 12 sessions for high impact. And some of the measures of success, like I spoke about, is measuring changes in behaviors, skills, and then in terms of performance. And some of the tools which I use here are either a psychometric test or a leadership test, and a 360-degree feedback, preferably from the stakeholders, the same set of stakeholders, who we have taken it before the start of the coaching engagement, and then you've taken it at the end of the coaching engagement, so you can see whether we are moving northwards, upwards, or sidewards. So you get multiple perspectives from the same set of stakeholders. Driving sustainability, how do we make behavior sustainable? So there are 3 case studies. I won't have the time to take you through this because I keep getting his prompters all the time, but very quickly I can talk about, and for those who would like to know a little more about that, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. So you can reach out to me, and more than happy to continue the engagement and share anything which I know. So career transition case studies. So one is of a C-suite leader in automotive transitioning from a tactical and an operating role to a strategic C-suite leadership role. So one of the challenges here is very strong operational leader, but 2 areas where I had to work with the individual was, one is building successors, credible successors, because everything was dependent on this individual. Very high drive and energy, very good knowledge of the business, but did not build a sustainable team. And in fact, the team actually was overawed by this individual. They looked upon this person as a kind of a demigod, a personality who knew everything. So this person used to take all decisions. He had a very loyal set of team members, but he didn't develop them enough to take his role when he had to step up to move to the next role. So succession planning is one area where I had to work with him, and also to improve his strategic, or rather build or enhance his strategic thinking. The other one here was of a CMO of a multinational corporation who was moving into a CEO's role, very high fire in the belly, knew the market well, excellent relationships with the customers, but not so good with peers. And eventually the peers would be reporting into him. So I had to get him to build more effective interpersonal relationships. And this is one of the quickest turnaround I have seen in a C-suite leader, about his intent and his willingness to go the extra mile and even demonstrate actions and observable behaviors. At the end of the session, interestingly, his CEO, whom he was succeeding, very jokingly told me, "What magic wand did you weave around him?" I said, "I have done nothing. All credit goes to him. Had he not taken ownership and had he not executed what we've discussed and agreed on, nothing would have happened. So I can't take credit for it. We need to give it to him." The other one here is about building a more inclusive leadership style. So there was a leader, a lady who was moving into a CEO's role. She was a CHRO of an enterprise, moving into a CEO's role. And there were some challenges in terms of getting her colleagues to accept that and collaborate with her. So I had to work with her. How do you ensure that you drive a culture of inclusion without being overwhelming and without coming across as a very strong authoritative figure? So this is again another quick turnaround which I had seen, where the acceptability was measured clearly through a 360-degree feedback. So the pre, which gave us some surprises even to her, and post the coaching engagement, which took 12 sessions over 12 months. So one could see a clear, noticeable shift, even in terms of acceptability for her as a leader. I've had to rush through these 3 case studies, but anybody who likes to know a little more about it, feel free to connect with me. I'll be more than happy to connect. And is there time for any Q&A? Okay. So he's now going to physically push me out of the stage. So yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much. If there's anything you would like to know, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be here for some time. Thank you very much.